founder and president of Divorce Right. And we provide training for HR professionals and company supervisors. And we provide divorce coaching and case management, providing the guidance and direction that your divorcing employees so desperately need. Divorce is a huge disruptor, not only to the employee going through it, but to the company they work for. And our coaches have a very unique perspective on divorce, and that sets us off apart from anything else that's in this process. Our coaches have a deep understanding of the legal, financial, and emotional aspects of divorce, and they can even handle the highest conflict of cases with compassion and professionalism. Our coaches are trained to look at the entire picture, helping your employees make good decisions based upon their goals and their expectations. So if you are an HR benefits manager or an HR benefits provider or consultant, please reach out to us and see if adding our suite of solutions is a good fit for your business. And as a reminder, we have SHRM credits for SHRM members, and we will post a link at the end of this broadcast so that you can make sure to grab those. And now I'd like to introduce you to Paulette Rigo. She's my friend, she is my colleague, and she is an incredible certified divorce coach and mediator. And she's also the director of coaching and case management here at Divorce Right. And today we're going to be talking about developing listening intelligence to support your divorcing employees with our special guest, Allison O'Brien. Allison is a facilitator and master trainer with Echo Listening Intelligence based in Boulder, Colorado. Since 2014, she's been helping to build a worldwide network of listening experts, certifying practitioners to deliver the Echo Listening Profile in 10 countries across 4 continents. With a broad scope of work, executive leadership coaching, leadership training for new, emerging, and mid-level managers, workplace conflict resolution, and corporate communication strategies, focused on listening, Allison uses 2 assessment tools, the Echo Listening Profile and the Conflict Dynamics Profile. Both instruments provide the crucial insights needed for shifting the way people receive information, share information, and manage their emotions in this challenging situation. So welcome, Allison. We're really excited to be talking about this topic because this is a critical skill for not only the HR manager, the supervisor, anybody in leadership, but also for the couple that's going through it. So I feel like we have a double whammy today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation and feel really passionate about listening, workplace communication, and then also managing the divorce process with the most grace and for the best outcome. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Paulette, I'm going to let you take it away.
Well, Vicki and I are so glad you're here, Allison. Thank you. And I can't think of anything more important to focus on than listening skills. As personally a mediator and a divorce coach, I believe 90% of the work I do is listening. It's so key. Yeah. And missing the little nuances of things is easy, where you're not just listening to the words they're saying, but the inflection. So for those people out there, that may not be aware of this, I want to dig right in with that foundation or a baseline. Where did this work come from? And could you define what listening intelligence is for those of us that need to have that? I'm gonna say it might not be defined in Webster's dictionary. What does it mean?
Yeah, great question. Well, let's talk about this concept of listening intelligence through the lens of some of the myths that are out there around listening. This myth of good listener, bad listener, or this myth around someone is listening or they're not. So one of my missions and a big part of my work is helping to dispel some of those misunderstandings about what listening really is. We know from the most recent science and research around listening is that it is a cognitive function. We hear with our ears, but we actually listen with our brain. So as we are taking in information, we're making sense of it and we're filtering it through unique lenses. And we all have these unique lenses that we're using, and we habitually develop behaviors that are preferences in terms of what we tend to pay attention to and for, and what we might unintentionally filter out. That said, we often assess or judge someone about their listening or whether or not they're listening, when in truth, they could be listening to and for different types of information than we are sharing. And so the better question that we want people to be asking is, are my habitual listening filters supporting or hindering the intended outcomes of this conversation? And is it appropriate for the people involved, the circumstances? And do I need to adapt my habitual filters, my default in this moment right now to adjust to these circumstances? And that's what listening intelligence is. It's built on this concept of self-awareness, presence, and recognizing the needs of our conversational partners, what's at stake for them, and then being able to adjust in real time to what we're in observation of. So that's really the end goal of this work, is helping people to develop that capability or that agility in their listening that allows them to be more valuable and contributive in any conversation, whether it's a high stakes decision that needs to be made or a challenging conversation with a colleague, a spouse, a friend. So that's really what I'm all about.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I've just write all that down. So I'm dying to know what the definition, or you could explain a little bit more about what habitual listening filters are.
Yeah, great question. So the research and the development of the Echo Listening Profile, which is a 10-question scientifically validated assessment tool, which identifies these preferences or these habits that we develop over time. There have been 4 main habits that were identified in this research. And I'll just share very high level, without going into a lot of nuance around each one, that there's connective listening, which is an external filter. It's listening for, how does this information impact others? The flip side is an internal filter called reflective listening, where someone with dominance in this habit would be filtering through the lens of, what does this mean to me personally? How does this impact my role, my job, what I need to accomplish? Then there's analytical listening, which is all about accuracy, truth, data, research, verifiable sources. And then there's conceptual listening, which is big picture, more abstract. It's about making connections between almost disparate ideas. It's future oriented, or possibilities. So if you think about people showing up with these different filters, it's highly likely that in the same conversation, people are walking away with very different takeaways of what's been said.
Right.
And as a result, they're moving in very different directions, despite the fact that they may feel like or believe that they're aligned. So when we're focusing or filtering through these different lenses, and we're picking up on unique information that may or may not get surfaced collaboratively, we could be moving in a very different direction than even the person that was sitting in the exact same meeting right next to us is moving in.
Yeah, I think is it biases that people bring to the table that determines kind of what they hear or how they hear it?
So I think that's a good way to say it. And I would say that, over time, we develop habits. That's how we characterize listening, is that it's habit-based. So over time, we humans develop habits. And in many situations, those habits serve us. And then at some point, maybe they no longer serve us or benefit us in the same way. And that's the point at which we might need to look at it and apply some intentional effort to shifting it. And that's really this idea of listening intelligence, is being self-aware What am I relying on in the moment habitually in terms of my listening filters? And is it most appropriate for this situation right now, given what we need to accomplish in this situation?
Mm.
So, for example, if my habitual filters are really more oriented towards people, the impact on people, and I go into a meeting that is really oriented around determining the budget for Q1, and I'm not filtering through that lens, I may not be showing up in the most valuable way, or I might be responding to some of the decisions that are made through a very different decision-making criteria than is called for in that moment.
Mm. So you mentioned those four. We've got connecting, reflective, analytical, and conceptual. Is the goal here to develop all four and know when to use the right tool?
That is such a good question, Paulette. The goal is to develop this great sense of self-awareness, presence in the moment, in every conversation, right? That
Mhm.
self-awareness, that presence, and then have the skill or the capacity to shift into a habitual filter that might not necessarily be a default for us or come easy to us, but to know how to apply that intentional effort or energy in order to pick up on different information that could be really valuable in that moment and could inform decision making, could enhance our perspective or shift our perspective about something.
Hmm. So you can easily see why listening is a key skill in organizations. I will never listen to the comment, "You're not listening to me ever again." Right.
I love that. Yes.
How you're listening, right? It's how
Right. It's just such a vague statement.
Yes. And that's the thing, especially when we are in difficult or challenging conversations. How often do we walk away saying, so and so didn't listen to me? I've said it the same, I've said the same thing 100 times and they
over
still
and over.
don't get it. In a
Mhm.
situation like that, to a leader or to, an individual in a challenging conversation that comes up over and over again, I would say, okay, so you've said the same thing over and over again. Have you shifted the way that you are saying it? Have you really tuned in to what's important to your conversational partner and shifted your message, maybe your language, in order to connect with something that they're going to really hear in a different, more impactful way? So the
So
onus
not
is on us as a speaker to be able to
Mhm.
shift at times.
Right. So not only do we need to have listening intelligence, we need to have speaking intelligence.
Right.
And
You have to be able to read the room, is what I think I'm hearing, right?
Mhm.
Read the room, know who you're talking to, and where their expectations are. So let me ask you, Allison, because I find this so important in this space, because when an employee is going through a divorce, they are not able to focus well. They are probably taking everything out of context, or I've said it a million times, and then the next thing you know, they're screaming, they're losing their minds, they're behaving in ways that they normally wouldn't behave. So if
Yeah.
you could offer just one piece of advice, maybe two, that will help someone immediately improve the quality of their listening, what would that be? And I know you have a story in there too about how you used this.
Yeah, yeah. So I will share with you and everyone on the call that I actually did go through the divorce process with no lawyers involved and no mediators involved. And I truly attribute, yeah, I know, think of all of that time and
Sure.
money saved because we were able to have some really challenging conversations and stay emotionally agile in the process. So I think this idea of emotional intelligence and listening intelligence, they're inextricably linked. It is really difficult to teach someone or train someone to be compassionate and empathetic and really care about what's at stake for someone else just inherently. I think that if you teach people to listen, they organically become more compassionate and more empathetic because they develop this desire to have more genuine, authentic, vulnerable communication and connection. So that piece of advice that I would give people is to really develop their emotional agility. And what I mean by that is in conversations or situations that are very triggering and where we perceive threat and our brain, our amygdala is being hijacked by this bioreaction of fight or flight or freeze or appease. When we are in the midst of that, it is impossible to listen. It is impossible to care about what's at stake for someone else and to be genuinely curious or to inquire. Typically, in that situation, when we're triggered, we are going to advocate for our own position and coerce versus really, truly try to listen, to understand, and learn. So, if we develop that skill or that agility to recover that part of our brain that is thinking and reasoning, if we have some tools to be able to manage that bioreaction, our listening improves. We become more compassionate about our conversational partner. We care more about what's at stake for them and what's having them show up in this way that may be triggering to us, that may be hurtful to us. But if we can manage ourselves and manage that emotional response and that bioreactive response, we can have a much more valuable conversation that's grounded in listening.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because we had talking about that hijacked amygdala and cortisol, right? Cortisol is supposed to be, it's that fight or flight hormone that, gets you from back in the day, when a tiger walked across the cave door, its design was to shut down all of the systems you don't need so that you could get blood to your glutes, your hamstrings, your calves, and get the heck out, right? So we're in an industry where that is like not only more than 15 or 20 minutes at a time, but it could be days, weeks, months, years, and even decades. We were not designed to be under this kind of chemical hostage situation with it taking over your brain. So you had said, what are some of the things that you do, the techniques? Because I know what I was taught by a wonderful woman by the name of Dr. Daniela Koffer, and she studies stress on labs at UC Berkeley. And she taught me a lot about this, and she has some. I'd like to know what your techniques or ideas are around getting rid of that hijacking.
Here's my top one, my suggestion, what I encourage is for individuals to have a go-to question, meaning a question that they ask themselves either internally or externally to their conversational partner, but a question regardless of the perceived threat, what that trigger is, what bioreaction they're in the midst of, whether it's fight, flight, freeze, deer in the headlights, or appease. And we use this go-to question when we have that awareness that we're in amygdala hijack. And that happens in 0 to 3 seconds, closer to 0 seconds, right? Yes. It is designed to guarantee our safety. Like you were talking about, that saber-toothed tiger, we've got to run from it. The thing with the amygdala is that it sacrifices accuracy for speed.
Yep.
So it's going to respond, and we need a tool to manage it effectively. The go-to question is, again, regardless of the situation, it's something that we ask ourselves that is a reporter type question. The one word we want to avoid is why at the start of that question. So we might ask ourselves, what just happened? Or my go-to question is always, what am I missing? And then I follow it with, what do I need to learn that I don't know now? So anytime I perceive a threat, a social threat that fires up my amygdala is, what am I missing? What do I need to know that I don't know right now? So it transitions into learning, inquiry, and compassion and getting more connected to what's at stake for someone else. So, for example, with my former husband, in these really challenging conversations, when he would say something that just fired me up, and I would have my hands on the keys, ready to respond, or I was ready to, fight back in the moment, I would pause and ask myself my go to, which transitions into this idea of what's at stake for him in this. What is underneath this response that's creating this behavior or this statement or this resistance? And just shifting into that, more inquiry, curiosity reduces some of that bioreactive response.
Hmm.
I'm not saying it's easy. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of practice. We're not reliable in this immediately. We sometimes have epic failures, and we have to return to the practice and take responsibility for the way that we showed up and acknowledge in that moment, maybe my listening wasn't really where it needed to be.
I love that. We have a comment from Celia. It says, I think one of the big issues is that this is not something people think about until it becomes an issue for them, but then it becomes all consuming. As you state, someone going through a divorce or breakup will be dealing with all sorts of issues, emotional, financial, legal, and depending upon how it all pans out for these issues can go on for years. So there is a huge knock-on effect, and this will impact them in the workplace. Absolutely. This is such a huge issue. You only have to look at the statistics. It's great that you are raising awareness. So thank you. Thanks, Celia. We appreciate that. And it's, you also have to be strong enough and self-aware enough to
Yes.
look and to say, what is it that you're bringing to this, right? Because it's sometimes you. It's not always them. Sometimes it's you that's causing that problem for sure.
100%.
Yeah,
I think
right?
you just said something really, really important, Vicki, which is that in any challenging conversation where emotions are involved and there's response or reaction, it's a dynamic that was created between two people that came together. And this dynamic, there is responsibility on all parties to that have come to create this. And so if I know I'm showing up in a way that is not adding value, I have to own that
Mhm.
and shift my
causing
behavior.
more chaos,
Yeah.
oftentimes, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
one of the things divorce coaches are so trained in doing, is to help them become accountable for everything, their reactions, observing their emotions, slowing down and being able to pull back a little bit so they're not reacting. Like you said, you have the keys, and these electronic devices are horrible when it comes to this. So there's no more eye contact, and you're not really able to listen, and you're not able to use all of your senses. It's a one-dimensional world instead of a multi-dimensional world. So we miss so much of that, and it becomes much more reactive, right? So there's a danger that hitting send is tricky. Mm-hmm.
We filter through our own interpretation when we read that written word or that written text. I always like to encourage people, when there is emotion involved, in a
Mhm.
conversation, like you just said, Paula, we need the most senses involved as possible. So if there's an emotional component to a conversation, really best case scenario that happens in person, next
Mhm.
best case over video or Zoom, next best case phone. And if that's not possible, pause the conversation. Back and
Mhm.
forth over text or email is the worst way to have a conversation when there's an
How,
emotional component.
yeah,
But the
how,
5-second rule in divorce doesn't work. It's at least 48-hour rule in my world. So,
yeah, yeah. So as we wrap this up, are there any insights into improving listening when we're in that super highly emotionally charged conversation, either with an employee, right, or particularly with a spouse? What are, give us a little bit, maybe some tips and techniques for that
Yeah,
emotionally charged, really challenging situation.
in that moment, what you need is time. You need to buy yourself time in order to recover that prefrontal cortex, the reasoning, discerning, thinking part of the brain. So that might mean actually saying out loud, I need a moment. I need a timeout. Or it might be simply taking it, breathing. We need at least a minimum of 10 to 14 seconds. And I would say use that go to question. Find one that is really appropriate for you. You can use mine if you like, which is what am I missing? What do I need to learn that I don't know now?
mm,
Um, but you can develop your own. And I would say ask that of yourself. You don't need to have the answer to it in the moment, but what's really important is taking that time before responding. The other thing, you might ask an open-ended question. You might say, "Tell me more about that," when you're in a challenging conversation. What's at stake for you in this?
Right, right. That
Mhm.
sounds amazing. Um, as we wrapped up, I want to remind everybody that if you are a member of SHRM, we have SHRM credits for you. So click on this link, and that will take you to a form to fill out and grab that credit. Allison, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, can I share your email address?
Please do. Yes, I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone
Uh,
about this.
Yeah, I think that this is really important. I think that listening to an employee that's in a really bad headspace is
Mhm.
really having a hard time with what's happening in their personal life, this skill is critical. So please reach out to Allison. We're going to be doing some more of this for your divorcing employees so that they can get some real serious skill sets around listening, so that they can have hopefully a divorce that went as well as yours did, without the need of everybody killing each other and destroying each other. And there's so much destruction in this process. It sounds like this can make a big difference with families as they end a relationship that's no longer working. Allison, thank you so much for doing this with us
Yeah,
today. And
thank
Paulette,
you.
thank you so much for being on this with us again today. And we will see you next week with another LinkedIn Live, where we work on trying to help you as employers manage the challenges that your divorcing employees are going through. And if you think that this is something that you'd like to learn more for your employees, for your clients that are, if you're an insurance broker, benefits broker, please reach out to us. We're happy to help. We love the opportunity to share what we do and the impact that we make on your employees. So until next week, we will see you all again. Allison, again, thank you so much. And I will see you ladies on the other side. Bye for now.